Hey, Topic in Life's Math and History, and we are going to learn about the quadratic formula and how it actually became a formula, like how it was discovered. So we're going to look into the history. So from the previous videos, we've been learning that the quadratic formula is x equals negative b positive negative the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And we also learned that the quadratic standard form has an a variable, a b variable, and a c variable. But when you solve quadratic trinomials, the quadratic formula was not the first method used ever to solve these kind of equations or expressions. There are other ways that we can use is we can factor them, we could also square root them, we can graph them, which we don't have a graph right now, and we could also complete the square. So back a few thousand years ago, the Babylonians started to use their own method that is helpful to complete quadratic trinomials. So mathematicians in the 1500s, one of them named Simon Stephen, he wondered, wait, if completing a square finds two x variables to find the x-intercepts, why can't we rearrange this quadratic standard form equation and try and turn it into something where x would be equal to something, because when you simplify all this, you can automatically get what your two numbers represent for x. So Simon Stephen had an enlightenment in 1547. So what we're going to do today is we're going to complete the square using the quadratic standard form and hopefully transform it into the quadratic formula. So the first thing to do normally is we have to add a 0 and we have to move that negative c to the other side. So we have ax squared plus bx equals negative c. So the next step is we have to understand what the letter a is. So what we gotta do is we have to divide everything by a to get x squared alone, because what we're trying to do is isolate the x variable in the literal equation. So we have x squared plus bx, missing number, equals negative c divided by a. We also have to do b over ax because we have to divide it by a. And at the end of negative c divided by a, we have another missing number. When we try to complete the square, we always try to find what's inside those missing numbers. The next thing to do is we have to handle that b over ax, like b divided by ax. What we could do is we could do b divided that by 2 squared. But there's a problem. We have a b divided by ax, and the formula says b divided by 2 squared. That is very confusing to do that. So what we are going to do is we're going to do 1 over 2 of b squared. When we do that, we can understand what this b thingy is, and we can also find out the factors or the twin binomials that could be fit into here. So let's do 1/2 multiplied that by b over a squared. When we do that, we can simplify this down to parentheses b, divide that by 2a squared. Or if you want to simplify even more, you would get b squared, divide that by 4a squared. We're getting one of the pieces that look like the quadratic formula. So, since this one right here represents this squared, we are going to put this bottom one, the most simplest one, into here, because they represent this b divided by 2a squared will get you b squared divided by 4a squared. So we're going to put b, divide that by 4a squared. And we're going to put on here b, divide that by 4a squared. When we do that, we get to now use and find the factors. Since we have an x squared, we want a factored square, and we have to square root something. So we have x, because of this x squared, plus b divided by 2a squared, in parentheses. That's what we got when we did the formula for the b variable. And that is going to equal negative 4ac, divide that by 4a squared, plus b squared, divide that by 4a squared. We got that because with negative c divided by a and b divided by 4a squared, these two are not going to match up, and they're not going to add up equally. So what we're going to do is, what two can go into 4a squared? Well, we can multiply that by 4a, and do that with 4a again. What we're going to be doing is now this becomes 4a squared, and merging 4a negative c is minus 4ac. So just by multiplying by 4a with a, not only we change the denominator, but change the numerator. That's how we got this answer right here. Then we have to add that by this. So we move this down here. Okay, so when we add these two, since we multiplied something so both of the fractions with variables have the same exact denominator, we could just cancel each other out and add by these. But don't you realize about something? Now we have b squared minus 4ac, which is going to be part of this thingy right here. What's inside the square root is called the radicand. So we got the radicand part of the formula. We have to now divide that by 4a squared, because they're the same thing when we added them. So now we have x plus b over 2a. That is our twin binomial, equals b squared minus 4ac divided by 4a squared. When you complete the square, to get rid of the square of the binomial, you have to square root the square. And that does every damage for this. So square rooting this, we now have parentheses, x plus b over 2a. Without the square, since we only have one twin binomial, is going to equal the square root of b squared minus 4ac, divide that by 2a, because 2a times 2a is 4a squared. We are so close to getting the quadratic formula. There is one more thing we have to do in order to get to the quadratic formula. We have to subtract this side by b over 2a and subtract this side by b over 2a. And when you do that and you get your x alone, we claim victory and we get the quadratic formula. So x is going to equal negative b, because you have a negative b, equals, well, actually positive negative, the square root of b squared minus 4ac, divide that by 2a. And that is how we got x alone. And that is how completing the square is one of the strategies. That is going to explain how we got the quadratic formula, turning a quadratic standard form into a new equation that looks like this. Now mathematicians and people around the world can insert their a, b, and c variable into the formula, and when they simplify it, they can easily get what their two x variables are. And that is the historical part for the quadratic formula. I hope this video has helped you. Thank you for watching Tao Ping Life's Math Industry. Like and subscribe.